Welcome to another episode of NBRI New Business and Retail Insights from the Center for Retailing Studies, Mays Business School, Texas A&M University. I'm your host, Venki Shankar, Director of Research and Coleman Chair Professor of Marketing. I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Dr. Harikesh Nair, the Jonathan B. Lovelace Professor of Marketing at Stanford Graduate Business School. His research brings together social science theory, statistical tools, marketing data to better understand consumer behavior and to improve the strategic marketing decisions of firms. Nair was previously Chief Business Strategy Scientist at JD.com. In this role, he focused on using marketing science and applied econometrics to derive growth for JD, leveraging the large data assets and the AI-driven technology platform of JD. Harikesh's research has been published in leading marketing journals such as the Journal of Marketing Research, Management Science, Marketing Science, and has been written up in popular press outlets such as CNBC, Economist, Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, and so on. Harikesh's research has also been recognized with awards from the QME, or the Quantitative Marketing and Economics Journal, the American Marketing Association Foundation, the Swiss Academy of Marketing Science, and the U.S. Council for University Transportation Centers. In fact, Harikesh was also recognized as one of the most outstanding business school profs under 40 by Poets and Quants. Harikesh has a PhD in marketing from the University of Chicago. Thank you, Harikesh, for joining me in this conversation today. How have you been in the last several months?
I've been okay, Venki, and up front, let me thank you for that very gracious introduction. Thank you. And I think we're just hanging in the air, doing the best we can during this very complex time, once in a century event for us as a society. I think my wife and my 7-year-old daughter and I, we are doing the
best you can to keep safe, right?
Sheltering in place thing in Palo Alto, yeah.
That's good to know. But, I described you as per your record or your achievements. How would you like to describe yourself, maybe in 5 words or 5 phrases or less?
I think I'm focused on learning, curious, scientific, and interested in marketing. So that would be some quick descriptors, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, that really describes you well, because knowing you and your passion for marketing and research. Tell us something about your research journey so far. I know that ever since your PhD in University of Chicago in 2005, how have you traveled, and tell us a little bit about your research journey.
Yeah, so I'm interested in using computing and data and quantitative methods to analyze questions of interest in marketing. And, this is for people who are interested in the use of math and economics and science in business. This is an amazing and incredible time. Because I think the idea that data and science was a nice to have in business has changed on its head to the idea that this is actually really a must have. And it's no longer a thing that the engineers do within the company. It's something that is percolated to the C-level, to the C-suite. And it's the AI strategy and the data strategy of a company is now something that is considered of strategic importance to a company. And people like us had drunk the Kool-Aid long time back, and we were looking at marketing as a science more than 20 years back. The founders of our field, the economists, the statisticians, people like yourself, we all thought, and we saw the loss in value that was kind of obvious to us in industry because of the lack of adoption of data and formal ways of thinking. But I think it's incredible now. We have companies that are actually leading the way in terms of using experimentation, applied economics, statistics, the tools of formal analysis and thinking, and good science to do good marketing, like the tech companies, the Amazons, the Googles, and the Facebooks of the world. So I am really blown away to be able to be a marketing professor at this time
Right.
especially situated here in Silicon Valley. Initially I started working on using econometric models and statistical models of consumer behavior, trying to understand how consumers buy goods and their response to prices and whatnot. But like many people in the modern economy, and especially people in the Bay Area, have become very interested in online advertising and the infusion and combination of tech and marketing and economics and data together. So most of my recent work has been on tech-driven marketing automation, and at the nexus between online advertising and online pricing. So it's pretty
Excellent.
exciting and very, very thrilled to be in that area. Yeah.
Excellent. So you would agree that data and science, our data science, is now a very sexy part of business, right? As you mentioned, even the C-suite people are looking up data scientists, and you yourself wore a different hat for a couple of years, doing the same thing in the industry. So it's really fascinating to really hear from you some of your research. So that was a very quick description of your research journey, and you emphasized a lot on the topics that you've been focusing on. Tell us something about some of your recent research. What have you been working on? What are some of the interesting findings or interesting applications? Let us understand what are some of the new things that you're up to.
Yeah, thanks. One thing I've been really interested in is trying to design online experimentation with online experiments that are self-serve, which by which I mean that they don't require human intervention, and which actually can be set up as products and which run on tap for measuring the causal effects of online advertising for large platforms such as e-commerce companies or other publishers.
That sounds
And
fantastic. Is it an outgrowth from your stint at JD.com, or is it separate research topic altogether? Or
no, actually, it is absolutely an outgrowth of my stint there, because JD, for those of your viewers who don't know much about JD, it's an e-commerce company based out in China, and it's very much like Amazon. And as
and in fact, it's the second largest e-commerce provider after Alibaba, right?
correct
Yeah.
in China, correct. And in the United States, we know now that Amazon has the third largest advertising business in the country after Google and Facebook. And part of the reason e-commerce companies do so well in online advertising is that search against which you can show ads often now begins on Amazon, and in China a lot of search begins on JD. So you can show search ads against it, which is actually very helpful to consumers, and that's a big business. In addition, there's also a lot of ad inventory on the app, on the SKU detail page or whatnot, and that's so you're essentially a publisher. And the third is that if you are having third-party merchants on your site, and most of your traffic is coming through your app, and in China, 80% of all e-commerce traffic goes through your app. Then if you're not in the first 3 or 4 pages of listings, then you essentially get no visitation. And therefore, the third-party vendors on your site, and JD has a lot of vendors, essentially become advertisers. They have to buy advertising in order to get exposure and whatnot. So it makes for a very big business. And going back to your question, Venki, related to online advertising and online experimentation and whatnot, online advertising is really a sophisticated field right now. And when the industry started, the fundamental technological problem was a software issue. How do I figure out a way to deliver ads at scale with low latency or whatnot? I think that problem is reasonably well understood.
Right.
The next big question was, what is a mechanism by which I would price ads and sell those ads? And we had an incredible revolution of using auctions and generalized second price auctions and whatnot. But I think that thing is also well understood. But now the fundamental question on the table is, once it's reached this kind of mature part of the life cycle, is the brands, which are the ones who are spending the money, are asking, tell me what I'm getting out of this. So show me return, And don't
Accountable
show me
advertising. Yeah.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
And don't just show me that people just click on it, but show me that it satisfies objectives that matters to the C-suite and to the board, such as, am I building a new brand here, a sustainable brand, etc. And for that, measurement and attribution and things like that are very important. And so we have to come out of the old ways in which we tried to do this with small mall intercepts or small surveys. So the modern way of doing it is through experimentation. But the experiments are very complex to design because the ads are sold through very complex intermediaries, and the ads are sold via auction. And it's impossible for a platform to have a human being sit and run each experiment on a one-off basis. So they have to be self-serve, they have to be coded, they have to be part of the product, and they have to work within the complex auction system. So that's where kind of my mind is at.
So is it basically online experimentation on the fly? Is that what you're saying, real time? So it almost sounds like AI driven a kind of experimentation where you said no human beings are involved. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, the part where it's absolutely AI-driven experimentation, and if you in a moment I'll explain the AI in that. The part where no human being is involved is simply a transaction cost of running experiments, because uh, in offline it's difficult to run experiments, but online we are running hundreds or thousands of experiments, hundreds per day, thousands per month. So it's difficult for a human being to sit and manage each of
But
those.
are these experiments well designed? Because we always hear that industry talk about A/B tests, and that may not be what we researchers call as RCDs, or randomized controlled design
Correct.
experiments.
Yes.
So when you refer to these AI-driven online experiments, are you referring to AI choosing the RCD, or is it some form of A/B test, or
Correct. Yeah.
both?
Yeah, it's a really good question that requires a very complex answer, and there's also a short
Okay,
version and a
sorry.
long version. That's okay.
Maybe
But
you can give a simplified version to the
yeah,
viewers. Yeah.
yeah, that's correct. So the A/B test that Venki you were referring to refers to show a new option as A and show the existing option as B, and compare something to a test and control group. Now, the A/B tests, as we all know, were invented in 1910s or 1920s by R.A. Fisher. And what he was trying to figure out was, on a plot of land, should I have one crop here or another crop here, or one type of fertilizer here or one kind of fertilizer there, right? It so turns out this paradigm does not scale well to internet scale data. Because in Fisher's world, it's very hard to change the experimental design, because I can't change what plot units or what parts of the
Receive the
plot was.
treatment and
Yeah, exactly, right.
right.
But in an online advertising setting, what happens is the data are arriving sequentially, and the objective function for the advertiser or the platform is also well specified, in the sense that the advertiser is trying to increase his profit, his or her profit, and the platform has a metric that it wants to optimize, right? So, and then it's very easy to change the experimental design. For example, I can easily change on the fly the amount of traffic flowing into the test group or the control group. I don't have to keep it fixed for the duration of the experiment. So we need to move away from this old world A/B testing paradigm to a sequential experimentation paradigm, in which I kind of start off with some prior beliefs, and I don't know exactly what is the good arm or which type of treatment. And as data arrive, I update my beliefs about what are good, and then I'm simultaneously balancing exploration and exploitation. And the reason I want to maintain some exploration is because I'm still experimenting. I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to resolve my uncertainty as to which is best. But at the same time, I don't have to remain stuck allocating 50% of traffic to an arm, which I kind of learned is much better than what I initially thought at the beginning of the experiment. So I got to adapt the experimental design based on the fact that, well, I can exploit what I learned, right? And that exploitation is based on a well-posed profit function. So the entire industry, for all practical purposes, has mostly shifted to bandits as a way of doing online experimentation that balances exploitation and exploration. and which are specific cases of reinforcement learning kind of
Learning, right?
algorithms.
That's what I was going to say.
Correct.
What you're describing is the reinforcement learning part of machine learning, which has been around, but which was applied in different contexts. Now you're bringing it to the ad tech or martech context.
Absolutely, yes.
Right? And you mentioned that the entire industry is already moving towards, but this is still a tricky process, right? Because it's also, you talked about scaling. So are there any learnings in here? What are some of the key findings? What works, what doesn't work? Which scales, which doesn't scale? Because there is still this idea that, I think most of your ideas are taken from the bandit that you mentioned. It's a slot machine examples in gambling casinos where the problem is very similar. Which slot machine should I choose next to maximize my chances of winning the lottery? And what are some of the learnings so far on that?
I think a number one learning is that sequential data
Right.
is here to stay. So we
Okay.
need to, we have to adapt experiments to the arrival of sequential information.
Fair
That's
enough.
one. Another aspect is that high feature sets are here to stay. What I mean by that is that the characteristic of an individual is not captured by a vector of one or two variables like age and gender. It's like, it's usually 100,000 X variables that capture. So you have to, all of us in academia and industry will have to accept the fact that we are dealing with high dimensional data with high dimensional feature sets. So we need to accept that and adopt that and just use methods that scale with that, because that's how we leverage the value of the data. The third aspect is that we have to confront the dichotomy in the literatures. While the machine learning literature has used bandits to find the best option, we, for actual decision making, we have to have some understanding of the uncertainty associated with that decision. And we need things like hypothesis testing and confidence intervals or not. And for that, we need to do inference.
Yeah.
But the inference crowd, the statistics community usually has used still in the A/B testing paradigm, and they're not as much using adaptive designs and whatnot. And also the dominant criterion for experimental design is reduce variance or reduce the probability of type 1 error, but actually opportunity cost. And an objective function called profit is actually what is very important for companies, right? So these communities have to work together, and you will
somehow they have not been on the same page, was what you're saying.
Exactly, yeah. And for researchers who work in that intersection, they have to deal with the fact that the languages and the sociologies, etc., of the communities are different.
The
so you just have to convert
terminologies and vocabularies have to jive too. But interestingly, you mentioned this. One of the worries is that if this becomes more programmatic and in terms of AI-driven decision making, where all the ads, if you're an advertising executive, advertiser, or a platform executive, should we just leave everything to machine learning and the machine to decide what's optimal? Wouldn't executives want to know the intuition behind some of this, even if you're not even talking about causality here? Just understanding why this allocation is better or why this decisions are better, right? Is there some ways in which we can learn something on that?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very important question, Venki. And actually, I would say for building good data-driven organizations, that is actually the key leadership question. I would say that it's actually a really bad idea to leave marketing to the algorithm or strategic decision making to the algorithm. That would be disastrous.
So what's the role of marketers here? We also know about the bias of algorithms too. So that's another issue which I have not touched upon.
Yeah. No, you're right. At the same time, it would also be a mistake to have leadership that is not aware of the power of algorithms or the value of data. And so I think it's really important that there is a good interplay between both of those. I think that for certain kinds of decisions that are high frequency, auction level, it does not make sense for it to be non done with human beings and non done algorithmically. And a standard example would be how to bid.
Right.
Mm. You participate in millions of auctions for different impressions, and you want to use algorithms for deciding how to bid, right?
Right.
And that is a task that should be or probably is
But
best
isn't
done
that
algorithm.
going on already with, for example, search advertising? People
Right.
just, bid. They're all small bids, so they don't really worry too much about losing on those or making suboptimal decisions. But what happens when you do large programmatic expenditures on these platforms as an advertiser? Where is the role of the executive, and is there some high level role, or is there some monitoring role? Is there some reality checks? What should be the role of the executive?
Right. Yeah. That's the key question, and I think the role of the executive here is to decide two things. One is what's the goal of the campaign? What exactly is the campaign trying to do? How
Mm.
does that campaign help the strategic goals of the company? Is this campaign going to help build a brand in a particular fashion? How much resources should I want to allocate to it? How does that relate to the internal capabilities of the company? And also deciding that, okay, here's the target segment that I want to calculate, and these are the products to which it applies to. All of these are important aspects of marketing strategy.
So the strategic elements like audience, who's the audience, what is the content, what is the differentiation, all those things should still be on the hands of the executive.
I
The
think it.
question about overall spend and allocation, what should be the role of the executive?
Right. I think there are a few ways of thinking about it. I don't know whether one is dominant to the exclusion of the
Of the
other.
other. Okay.
I think it's really. I think for algorithmic uh, 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 and
Decision making.
data-driven decision making to thrive, first the executive has to decide to give up control over certain aspects of the process and retain control over
Right.
certain aspects of the process. What you give up and what you don't is actually a strategic decision that
Very good.
requires a thoughtful decision making. The second aspect is that who to hire and what kind of personnel and human
Right.
capital to bring into bear on that. It's a strategic decision. One of the most important thing is to how to build your team in order to do that, right? And what vendors and tools you use. That's a strategic decision.
Okay, tell
But
us something about that decision, because many of the viewers are students, entrepreneurs, former students. They're all either trying to learn these new skills or even migrating their skill set to that. So, what do you think? You worked at JD.com. What are some of the skills that are being sought after for these kinds of positions or these kinds of tasks?
um, just to clarify your question, Venki, a little bit, do you mean skills for data scientists or for executives that are managing data science
Both,
teams?
yeah.
Yeah.
You can say both, yeah.
Since we are all invested in our MBA programs, let me start with the managerial part.
Okay.
I think there are a couple of things here. Okay, one of the things is that unlike offline industries, which are data poor, typically, broadly speaking, internet scale companies are very data rich, and there's a lot of high frequency information about the user, and that requires actually a mindset change for the typical manager or leadership, in the sense that you look in an offline situation. Um, a lot of leadership is about making the right decision in the absence of a lot of information. So
Right.
your gut feel, your intuition, and your experience comes in, and you want to make that call, right? But I think in that kind of decision making style may not scale well
Mhm.
to an internet, because that's a top down style. But in a very internet scale business, a lot of information is coming up from the bottom.
Right.
And I think the role of the leadership is to take that information, and a lot of decision making has to be bottom up, and channelize that correctly and use that information correctly, and then make a decision that as to who will manage that. What of the 5 different ideas that are coming up from the bottom will I listen to? How can I listen to all of them? And that requires giving up a lot of control, trusting the data. People at the bottom know the data more than you. And so it requires a little bit of giving up of control, and you become more of a coach rather than a commander. So I think that's very high level, just on the mindset part. On the skill part for MBA students, I think you probably don't need to understand the nitty-gritty details of algorithms, but you still need to have an understanding of the market institutions. Just like saying, if you went into finance, you can't be successful on Wall Street unless you understand the institutions of Wall Street.
Mechanism, right?
And online advertising is a complex market.
Right.
You have to understand the DSPs and the SSPs and the ad exchanges and what's going on there. So I think having good institutional knowledge is very key to make right decisions. You have to understand the value and the disadvantages and the advantages of algorithms.
Right.
You have to respect science, because an amazing scientist can do amazing things.
Right.
And you have to respect code. Right. Good code is important, because computing pervades everything. So I think that building awareness is very important.
Very good. Yeah, this is excellent.
Okay, for the data scientists, this is a little simpler. I guess everything that we do in our PhD program and more is relevant.
Right.
The economics is relevant, the statistics is relevant, the coding is relevant, the data is relevant, right. The good
coding, computer science, machine learning,
formal training in understanding methods to science is important. Good understanding of how to design experiments. It's all relevant. It's hard, I think, for one person to do all everything. Yeah. So I think it may be good to specialize also in one or two things. Otherwise, the sea of knowledge is too vast to swim in.
That's excellent. But so far, you've been talking about advertising, mainly communication. But when you do talk about these big companies, platform companies like JD, Alibaba, Amazon, Google, even in the advertising space, some of these also are function as marketplaces, like definitely right. Amazon. So there's a lot of retail involved in that, if you were right. to. So in what sense are these complementary? Should people just focus mainly on advertising, or should they also look at, you mentioned one of your research areas is pricing, and what products to sell, which platforms, in what form, how much to advertise. That also becomes a huge decision area for marketing executives and the C-level executives too, right? So tell us something about it. I'm sure you have a lot of experience, and both your research and your industry experience. Share something that we'd all like to walk away with.
Yeah, I think it's a complex situation, and I will speak about it from the perspective of 3 different constituents. One is the scientist and the academic like us,
right.
And the other is for the brands, and the third is for the platform. I mean, for the scientist and for the academic, there are incredible opportunities and problems to solve in a variety of areas other than just advertising. For example, pricing is actually a very tricky topic. And I think my fundamental learning from pricing is that I think there's just a little bit too many silos in pricing. For example, we have the strange situation in many business school departments where operations research professors often work on the inventory side of the problem, while marketing people like us, we work on the consumer side of the problem, and then the economists work on the auction design problem. Right. But in a real company, when you just sat down with the teams, you can't sell something unless it's there in the warehouse. So you just cannot set the price without accounting for the inventory. And then the mechanism by which you sell, there are myriad different ways of selling the mechanism. So I think it'll be good for all of us to be way more interdisciplinary on this topic.
On these, that's an excellent point.
Um,
Unfortunately, we are on what you're saying is we are silos in our research, and we need to be more together. I couldn't agree with you. I'm going to shift a little bit into some of your recent research papers, the findings, of, especially in some of the experiments. So some of the papers that caught my attention was some of the very fascinating experiments you've done with your colleagues. One of them is advertising serves as just a signal. Even if you mention that it's sponsored advertising, it still has an effect. Tell us something about that, because that's a very interesting finding for a lot of people. Because generally the perception is that most of the advertising is intrusive, especially digital. People want to click away from advertising, and if they see sponsorship, the feeling is people are definitely going to discount it or not even pay attention. But your findings suggest something opposite. Tell us
that's
something
correct.
about
Yeah, just to react to that, I think it is certainly true that a lot of advertising seeps into our consciousness by interruption. And when they interrupt the fact that I'm watching a TV serial or I'm reading the news, the fact that advertising comes in between is annoying. And therefore, advertising can be annoying, especially when it's not well designed and it's intrusive.
Right.
And so the general idea is that advertising can be an annoying, and it's kind of like a cost to humankind. And I feel that the story has been oversold, and it lacks nuance. And I think the dominant narrative that advertising is a bad is just a false narrative. In particular, when we come to search advertising, which is the dominant form of online advertising, I should just simply think of advertising as one form of information. It's just informing me about the various options. And if you look at surveys, in search is where people find advertising the least annoying compared to display or whatnot.
Because it's directed by the consumer. Is that why they find it
directed by the consumer? And the consumer's purpose in running a search on a restaurant search engine is to find a bunch of options that are helpful for you. And out of 10 possible options, all of them are relevant to the search query. It so turns out that 3 are paid for. So what? They're still useful, right? So it's not interrupting. It's consistent with the goal of the search, right? Now, the question, there are two big questions here. Is it really true that in equilibrium, the advertisers who are advertising turns out to be advertisers who are generally better than the ones that are not advertising? Well, that's an empirical question. It's possible that the market incentives are such that only the bad restaurants advertise, for example, and then consumers should have serious distrust. Yeah. Or it's possible that, the old story goes, which is the signaling story, that if a bad restaurant advertises, the consumer would go there and then never come back, right? Visit it. And therefore, the restaurants that know that they're pretty good but don't have enough awareness in the population have an incentive to advertise. And if that's kind of true, it's possible that
there'll be a separating equilibrium and they'll signal.
So it's worth testing.
Okay.
And there are circumstances, and it's that that equilibrium obtains. And in the paper, we outline an experimental design that suggests that this equilibrium is obtained in a particular restaurant search information platform. Yeah.
And related to that, you also ran some nice Facebook experiments on Facebook, where you, if I remember correctly, you tested the effect of social media messages content on engagement, and you found some differences on the type of message content, whether it's brand personality related or price related. And there's some other additional nuances. Could you please let us know the highlights and also unpack those highlights?
Correct. Yeah. By the way, I would be seriously remiss if I did not mention my co-authors there. The stuff with signaling was with my incredible colleague Navdeep Sahni, and this work on Facebook is with Darken Lee and with Karthik Hosnagar. So I'm just one cog in the machine. Okay.
No, you're incredibly modest, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so the Facebook stuff was actually not an experiment, though we had some quasi-experimental variation. But what we were trying to figure out is what kind of content actually gets some play in terms of engagement from Facebook users, such as getting likes and clicks and comments and shares and whatnot. And surprisingly, though, there is not as good a good theory of ad content in economics and in academia. We have casual evidence that some kind of content matters, and the best evidence come from the applied psychology literature, which we should be proud of in our field. And my colleague Jennifer Acker has done interesting research that showed that that when consumers want to establish a relationship with a brand, which has some similarities to how we establish a relationship with another human being, and to the extent that we can relate well to the personality of a brand, we might actually be more willing to engage with the content from that brand. And that's very different from kind of functional content attributes, such as like giving me the price or telling me that there is a deal. Please go click on it and get the deal, otherwise it'll expire in 3 days. That's more like a search attribute. The other one is more behavioral or personality content. And we used some text analysis and image recognition algorithms to encode content of Facebook posts. And we essentially found that the brand personality content is actually very important to getting a lot of engagement. And it's a bit funny. You would have a brand such as Nike that would send you, Wenki, a message if you were connected to that brand saying, this is a great day, awesome day for running, have fun. And it's hard to
somehow it
imagine
resonates with the consumer in terms of
exactly
engagement.
and but the bulk of a lot of posts is like that, and the point of the paper was to kind of articulate that this kind of content is actually quite valuable.
Okay, this is a standard dilemma now with retailing, at least brick and mortar retailing in doldrums because of COVID, and a lot of retailers are shifting online. We see a lot of digital transformation, not just in retailing, in a lot of businesses. More and more businesses are directly connecting, communicating with the consumers, either through social media or even personally, through apps, as you mentioned, through maybe just text messages. More and more retailers today are doing the order online pickup, and all the conversations are going on. So one implication of your finding is that even those exchanges, if it is not deal oriented, if the retailers could really build a little bit of some of the brand saying, hey, today is a hot day, you could come and order and then pick up curbside your favorite beverage, right? Whatever. Even that would be considered some kind of a personality or some kind of emotion related content, as opposed to simply deal and price, right?
Correct.
Would that apply in that situation?
I think so. Okay. I think, and just to react to that and allow a comment, there are just to unpack that on 3 different dimensions. The first thing is that the scary thing for many brands now is that there was always a retailer that was mediating the relationship with the consumer, but now there's a retailer called Amazon, which is incredibly sophisticated.
Yeah.
And so it's become very important to build a direct relationship with the user, right? And so that the relationship is not mediated by a tech platform, right? So, but then the goal of a relationship is not just to get a person to buy on sale, but the goal is to build a brand and build associations that are sustainable. And the point of the paper is that you can't build those associations by telling you, hey, here's 20% off, buy today. Right. Associations have to be built through engagement. Right. And you need to find a way to generate engagement. So these brand personality related messages can provide a lot of engagement and sustained engagement. Yeah.
One of the outcomes, tell me if it's consistent with your finding, which is a lot of firms are trying that for a long time, but it's very crowded out there. So, if I have General Mills or Kraft or Coke or any other consumer or an apparel, how do I create an engagement in a world in which the consumer is bombarded, a shopper is bombarded with lots of messages, and they are always finding some creative. So one of the platforms that are very catchy among at least the Gen Zs and millennials is TikTok, right? So they are trying to find some nice ways. So you would say that if a brand has to really connect directly with the consumer and not be dependent on the intermediary, then it's better for the brand to not just not offer those deals, as you said, but also come in creative ways to engage with them, maybe humor, maybe other kinds of emotions.
Yes.
But those kind of activities works. That's what you find, right?
Absolutely.
Previously, people used to say that, with deals, if I give deal, I can know that person has purchased or not. I can track the attribution, which you referred to right in the early part of the conversation. How do firms really, get some attribution to this? That
Yeah.
would be a tough question for them.
Attribution is a complex one. Since you mentioned TikTok, when I was at JD, we built ByteDance, which owns Douyin
Right.
in China, and Taotiao. So Douyin is the Chinese equivalent of TikTok. So is a partner of JD, and we built some experimentation solutions in collaboration with Douyin. So I think for attribution, it's actually key. Two things have to come in: some efficient ways of tracking, which means some pixel has to be dropped onto the engagement mode, and then you have to be able to track the action, for example, purchase or whatnot, which for JD is actually easier because if you click on an ad, it triggers the JD app, and then you purchases can be you can close the loop on purchases. Yeah, but in the United States, the tracking problem is split across very many companies. So that's one complex issue, and cookie tracking doesn't work well, etc. The other one about attribution is, there's no solution. So what we would do is to build an online experimentation system. Sometimes we would show the ad and push it to TikTok, Douyin, and then sometimes we would just hold that back. And then we'll compare outcomes for users who. So in the formal language, to use some formal language, hopefully your viewers are aware, it would be like intent to treat effect as opposed to a treatment effect. Right. But intent to treat is quite reasonable. But the attribution is complex. That's why in the beginning of the conversation, we both agreed that this is one of the most important issue, right? And so also with TikTok, just to mention one thing, you got to be a bit careful because we have seen and that the context matters quite a bit for how users engage and infer the efficacy of the brand and the message. And in TikTok, not all context can be actually amenable to the positioning of the brand. Some of the content can be a little racy. So brand safety is actually an important point thing that everybody has to worry about, and that has to be done algorithmically or in some fashion. Yeah.
Right, and we know about all these issues even in YouTube, right? Lots of brands inadvertently get associated with the wrong or undesirable elements or content. So it's been fascinating talking to you so far, and I don't want to really dive deeper and deeper because without exploring your other parts of your personality, which is what does Harikesh do for fun, right? This looks like fun for you, but there must be other things that you do for extra fun. Right?
Is that a question for the COVID time or the non-COVID time?
No, COVID, non-COVID, anything.
Yeah, I think I like jogging. So go for runs on Stanford campus every week.
You do the dish run there or no?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the dish is very popular.
Right.
I do the dish, though recently it has become more and more challenging with COVID.
Right.
We go for bike rides often with my 7-year-old daughter, so that's an incredible source of fun. We go for ski trips every once in a while during the winter. That's been fun, though this year it's been a little challenging with COVID.
Right.
We do a fair amount of traveling, my wife, my daughter, and I. And I think one of the nice things about academia is that we get to travel quite a bit
Quite a bit.
as part of
Now,
our
now
work
again,
as well.
COVID times, it's all
Yes,
curtailed.
yes. I do watch a lot of TV, a little bit extra, more than I ought to. Yeah.
So, what are some of the books that you read? You didn't mention books. I'm sure you read a ton of books. What are some of the recent books you've read, and what would you recommend to some of the viewers?
Yeah, my all-time favorite fiction is Lord of the Rings. I definitely recommend that to go back and hit the original, as well as the Silmarillion and the other books by Tolkien, which have a lot of context for that. But unfortunately, work is all-consuming, and I've had not
Right.
much time
Much
to
time.
read fiction recently. Yes.
No, I understand. You can't do that as well as watch a lot of
It's
TV
true.
shows and
Yeah.
programs, right? And since you do a lot of work on advertising, so you could justify and say that, hey, I'm just watching these shows for research, right?
Yes, that is true.
I'm sure you don't need that excuse. But let me just uh, again switch tracks and ask for your crystal ball or some kind of advice for you. Where do you see this whole world of marketing tech, ad tech, uh, evolving in the next 5 to 10 years, and where do you see this playing out maybe 10 years from now?
Yeah, this is a tricky business because none of us are good at these predictions. And if we were actually good, we could actually trade on it. Yeah,
Right.
and make it. Yeah, I guess one thing we we all should be sensitive to is that as a marketing academic community, as well as big tech and others, I think we have been a little bit too casual with data, and the way in which we utilize the data. And I think we all agree that the efficiency gains are huge, and that the positive welfare effects for consumers in terms of lower prices and better options being made available to them, and the reduction in the search costs associated with improved targeting and whatnot has been incredible. But I think we just, as a community, we just need to take
Dial back
a
a little bit.
deeper,
Yeah.
yeah, a deeper look at a formal model for how do you think about privacy. It's no longer an ignorable thing now. And so I think marketing academics should think about it more. So I think privacy. I think the extreme that you cannot use any data is also not good for society. It's not good for consumers. And so I think I personally hope, I'm not saying it will happen because I don't know. I'm hoping that there will be a new kind of privacy conscious marketing econometrics and a privacy conscious statistics and a privacy preserving ad tech that comes into play. And all the leading platforms are in that game. We see things like differential privacy and things like that, which are used algorithmically to do this. So, and then blockchain can be used actually quite a bit to do.
To ensure privacy
Correct. So I think
stipulations.
that'll be a big one
Yeah.
over a 5 to 10 year horizon. It's
Right.
completely non-ignorable, and that is going to get infused into pretty much everything. And then another aspect is that we cannot stay divorced from what's happening in industry, and I think it is fair game to say that at least in this country, there will be some changes to the big five tech companies. But will it be a breakup? Who knows? Will it be some kind of divestiture, or would it be some kind of restrictions on Amazon and Google and what Facebook? And that in turn will affect the industry dynamics quite a bit. There, there is a feeling that the duopoly power of Google and Facebook is quite high. So that can have consequences for tracking and things like that. And I think the research will be affected by that. The industry will be affected by that. I think the idea that science, formal science, will go away, or that data or computing is kind of like a fad or something. It's just crazy. It's just not going to go away at all.
Okay, so
It's going to
if
become
anything,
even more.
it'll be enhanced, right?
It'll be enhanced in a privacy preserving manner,
Okay, that's a very nice prediction. I'm
which
glad
means
you.
more math, not less math.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. So on that note, what would be some last words of wisdom for many of our viewers, which would include former students, entrepreneurs, executives, and current students, undergraduate and graduate? I mean, to just name a few constituencies.
Yeah, I think
So,
it's really, we are in the time of human capital. So
right.
we have to build our human capital quite a bit, which means we have to learn and acquire knowledge, and we have to be humble. There's just so much out there, and in order to run a business
So would you
effectively,
say continuous learning is very
continuous
critical?
learning, yeah, there is
Right.
absolutely, and not just for the students and the entrepreneurs, also for the professors.
Right. So it's a continuous learning paradigm. There's a fear that people feel that your shelf life is, half life of your learning is also coming down. So is that a fair fear, a fair prediction, or there are some fundamental building blocks that will always be helpful no matter where you are?
Well, experimentation was invented in in 1920. It's
Right.
not going away.
Right.
The demand and supply is
Has
not
been
going
there
away.
for a
Yeah,
long time. Yeah.
but we are in a data-rich world with
Right.
lots of adaptivity, so we have to adapt to that. But I don't know will the fundamental themes that we have all aware of are changing.
Are going to change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but we
That's
still
good
need
to
to
know.
adapt. Yeah.
That's very reassuring because many times we know a lot of people say, hey, the pace at which we have to learn seems to be incredibly fast. And we are worried that can we keep up with this, right? Which is also a valid fear. But
Yes, true.
I'm glad to hear the reassuring words. This is fun. You've covered a lot of grounds. You've covered your industry experience, your research insights. You've shared it beautifully. And you've also given some projections of the future and some words of wisdom for the viewers. And thank you so much for your time. And I wish you great luck going forward in your research or whatever next gig you're going to do. You might be going back to industry or doing both. Whatever you choose to do, wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. It was a pleasure, and thanks for hosting it. And good luck on the center as well.
Thank you so much.